2016 regular session of the Anamosa City Council, City Hall Council Chambers. 1.0 roll call.
Rick,
Here.
Bill,
Here.
Rod,
Here.
Cody,
Here.
Betty.
Here.
And now we'll have a moment of silence for our fallen Chuck Smith. Two point oh, motion to approve the minutes from the following meetings. November 14, 2016 regular council meeting and November 16, 2016 special council meeting.
Move to approve.
First by Bill,
Second.
second by Rod. All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed? Carried. 3.0 public hearings done. 4.0 presentations. 4.1 Eagle Point Solar, Dubuque, Iowa. Representative to present options for solar power in the community. And we have Larry Staffen from Eagle Point Solar to give us a short presentation.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to visit with you about this. So there are several items, specific items that I want to cover, so I have 4 bullet things that I want to speak about. I will refer to some of the information to the booklet that I put in front of you as we go through that. And the 4 items is simply an introduction of our company to the council. I want to talk about solar equipment, solar policy, utility policy, and the process to follow to potentially have a successful project. Obviously, I'm here to answer questions about anything regarding solar, including funding, so I will keep this to a minimum, but obviously I want to make sure that everybody gets their questions answered. So, first and foremost, is anybody in this room familiar with who Eagle Point Solar is? Besides him. Okay. All right, we are a construction company based out of Dubuque. We build nothing but solar arrays. Large arrays, small arrays, roof arrays, ground arrays, static arrays, transitioning arrays, and so on. We do install 12 months out of the year. We are one of the few companies in the state of Iowa that works specifically and solely in the solar industry. Okay? At 28 employees with an excess of 300 projects in the Midwest, that does make us one of the largest in Iowa. Okay? So we bring a large amount of expertise to the solar industry, and obviously what my job is to do here tonight is to help educate you on the simple basics of solar and how to be successful if you decide to move forward with what it is that we do. So with that being said, if you go to your brochure, there's a couple of documents in there, and I'm looking at these 2. Okay? When you talk about solar equipment, there's 2 pages in there that actually have pictures of solar modules. Okay? We as a company utilize solar modules that come from US-based companies. That's a decision that we made as an ownership group several years ago to stay with a US-based company right there. We use 2 different companies, and the reason we use 2 different companies is because of the fact that the module availability is getting a bit scarce because the solar industry is literally taking off like a rocket ship. Both of these modules, whether they're coming from Suniva or SolarWorld, to us internally, are interchangeable. They are a Tier 1 tempered glass solar panel that resists hail, golf ball sized piece of hail at 262 miles an hour. They have 25-year warranties to produce power. They have 40-year life expectancies. SolarWorld is manufactured in Hillsboro, Oregon. It's a 41-year-old US-based company. Soneva is about a 12-year-old US-based company. And to us, these particular modules are interchangeable. The reason we have two of them is due to availability. If we can't get one from one, we'll switch to the other so they're identical. So you have this. Basically, the solar panel collects the sun, okay? But the solar panel itself, whether it's on the ground or on the roof, does absolutely no good unless you have one other page that we have here, which is a page called the inverter. Because the solar array creates DC current, the inverter converts that to AC electricity. These things are essentially married to each other, okay? So that's the basic equipment side of it. We assemble them. We assemble the arrays. We don't manufacture our own product that we install throughout there. Okay. Basically, what happens is you install a solar array on the ground, on the roof, somewhere. That array is built on the customer side of the meter, because we have the solar array, we have the meter, and then we have the utility. And in this case, for the most part, what Tammy said is Alliant Energy. Okay. Alliant Energy does have the best solar policy in the state of Iowa. There is absolutely no doubt about that. So it's very, very attractive, and it comes down to a term that you need to familiarize yourself with called net metering on how this all comes together. Basically what net metering is, it's a metering arrangement between the entity receiving the power and the utility that provides the power, that if you build a solar array, and if it does happen to overproduce at any point in time, that energy goes back to the utility, which in this case is Alliant, and Alliant Energy will give you full retail credit, a kilowatt hour of electricity credit at what you're paying for it. So it's an extremely attractive policy. So anytime you overproduce, you can use that credit at a later point in time, tomorrow night, tonight, next month, or next year. When I design a solar array, depending on what the objective is, I will typically build in at least one scenario where you will be overproducing so that you can take advantage of that net metering policy. And the reason I might want to do that is because solar arrays don't work at night. So we still have to be connected to the utility where you would have to buy energy from them. So, and that's part of the design that we'll talk about it, okay? But it is absolutely critical, if you decide to go down this path to analyze whether or not this makes sense, is to understand what the utility policy is. And that's obviously something that we do as a company. We're very familiar with all of the policies across the state because there are literally 100 different policies. Okay, in this particular case, it's part of the service that we bring to the table. Now, as far as the process of going through something like this has to make sense. So if you're going to go down this path, what we bring to the table is we will do an analysis of areas that you're specifically interested in potentially taking advantage of solar energy. Very simply, what we do to start is we gather the power information from whatever meter you want to feed. Maybe it's this building, maybe it's the water treatment plant, maybe it's some other building, okay? I gather at least 12 months and maybe 24 months of the historical kilowatt hours that you're consuming. And the reason I do that is if I don't know how many kilowatt hours of electricity you're consuming, I have no idea how big to build a solar array, okay? So once I have that information, it's a mathematical calculation for me to sit down and figure out how many solar panels that you need. Once I know how many solar panels that you need, then I can figure out how much something like this costs. And that's that starting point that you can sit down and evaluate whether or not this makes sense. Okay? So what we do as a company as far as the process to ensure a successful project, we have a consultation meeting very similar to this. I would encourage that if there is interest that we sit down and we go maybe into a work session where I can get into a lot of the details about some of the stuff that I'm not going to cover tonight. But basically we gather that information. I put some information together and I build a solar financial report for you based on whatever meter that you want to feed or building or facility. This report is essentially going to answer 5 questions, okay? And the 5 questions very simply are, how big is it going to be? How much is it going to cost? What is my payback in years? What do I get for equipment? And what is my internal rate of return, so that you as an entity can sit down and figure out if that makes sense, okay? That's the start. Once we get that accomplished, and you say, well, this one makes sense, and maybe this one doesn't make sense, then we can go into an engineering side to figure out if we can build it. Okay? Because if there's a restricting factor that we have from the solar industry, it might be the availability of land space or roof space of wherever we're going to put this. Okay? So that's the next step that we go through. And we as a company will do that. And no, we do not charge for that. It's a service that we do to go through this particular analysis. So once we figure out the size, and once we figure out the location, and once we figure out whether it's a roof array or a ground array or something like that, and we engineer it and we understand that we can build it, then we have to figure out how to pay for it. Okay? Unfortunately, solar arrays are not free. Okay? We're a construction company, but yes, that's what we do for a living. We build solar arrays. So when it comes down to funding these items, and this is where it gets not necessarily complicated, but it gets more into the educational side of what you're eligible for. And when I say eligibility, I want you to refer to this document right here. At the very top of this document, it has a listing of incentives from the federal government and the state of Iowa that the public or the businesses are eligible for in the form of tax credits, depreciation schedules, potentially REAP grants, et cetera, where as a homeowner, I could offset 45% of the gross cost of my array. As a business owner, it could be 65% of the gross cost of an array. Obviously, as a city, you are not eligible for any of the goodies because you don't file a tax return. So there is no benefit to you for a tax credit or a depreciation schedule, okay? So where does that leave you? Okay, so we're back to whatever the dollar amount is, and the amount that I used this afternoon was $100,000 because the math is easy, okay? If this particular entity has the ability to pay cash for a $100,000 array or $10,000 or $200,000, great, we absolutely take cash. There's no doubt about that. If that's not the case, you can finance it or you can lease it on conventional leasing or funding mechanisms. Now, if the cash option or if the leasing option or if the financing option is something that does not of interest to you, there is a funding mechanism that is available to government entities or basically entities that do not file tax returns, city, county, municipal, churches, and school districts, and I'm going to refer to this document right here. It is called the concept of a power purchase agreement. And the power purchase agreement essentially was something that came about in the state of Iowa because there was a solar company based out of Dubuque that got sued by Alliant Energy about a lease power purchase agreement that we wrote for the city of Dubuque. Basically what happened is the city wanted to put a large array on their municipal building. They did not have the money to pay for it. They were not going to finance it. They were not going to lease it. So we as a company funded that project under a power purchase agreement, and included in the lease payment was the cost of the power. Alliant Energy took exception to that because in their mind we were acting as an illegal utility because we were selling power. Okay? We obviously took a different side of it, says, no, hey, we're just leasing the array, the cost of the power is included, et cetera, et cetera. Well, one thing led to the next. It led to a lawsuit. Iowa Utilities Board ruled in favor of the utility. The district court favored Eagle Point Solar. It wound up on the desk of the Iowa Supreme Court, and they sided with Eagle Point Solar, stating that the concept of a lease power purchase agreement is legal in Iowa. And that's what this document is for. Basically what it comes down to in this funding mechanism, if the other three are off the table, the funding mechanism essentially involves 3 entities. You have the person that's building the array, which is us. We build solar arrays for a living. And you have somebody else, an entity, a bank, an individual, or a group of individuals that actually pays for the array. According to the document, that's the financier. Okay? that financier person is going to take advantage of the tax credits and the depreciation. Okay? So, Eagle Point Solar builds it, that's what we do for a living. The financier pays for it, they take advantage of all of the tax credits, and they actually fund the project. Well, the logical question comes up is, okay, so where does the city of Anamosa wind up? What's in it for us? As the buyer of the power, the financier will sell the power to the entity that's buying it at a lower rate than what they're currently paying. That's typically what happens. The example that I gave this afternoon was the PPA that we hold for the city of Cedar Rapids. They are an Alliant Energy customer. They're paying 12 cents per kilowatt hour. We signed up for an 8.5 cent PPA rate for them. So in other words, we agreed to sell the power to the city at 8.5 cents instead of what they're paying is 12. So their immediate savings under that was that percentage of difference. Okay? And the reason the investor can do that is because I'll sell the power cheaper because I'm taking advantage of all the goodies. Okay? So the biggest advantage to the city is, one, you can take advantage of renewable energy. You can put a solar array wherever you want to, wherever it's feasible to do it or it makes sense, literally with very little to no money out of your pocket. Because we build it, somebody else finances it, and you essentially pay for the power that the array produces at a discounted rate. That's the concept of what the PPA brings. Now, every PPA is a little bit different because it's directly tied to the amount of money that you're paying per kilowatt to the utility. That's one of the analysis things that we have to do. Once again, this does have to make sense. So let's say, for example, we decide to go forward and this is an 8 or a 9 cent PPA and we sign a 20 or a 25-year agreement because that's typically what happens, okay? The financier of the array will then at some point in time turn the array over to the city at whatever the fair market value is at that particular time. That could be $500, it could be $1,000 because eventually you will own a solar array. It's just that you don't have to come up with upfront money to do this. Now, responsibilities of the solar array. You obviously don't own it because somebody else does. The somebody else that owns it is responsible for insurance, upkeep, maintenance, etc. Your skin in the game is that we are putting it on your property somewhere, whether it be on the roof or on the ground. But keep in mind that the financier has no interest in owning a solar array after 20 or 25 years. So even if you were on a PPA for 20 or 25 years and that array gets turned over to you, you still have a piece of equipment that has a 25-year warranty and a 40-year life expectancy, so there's definitely value there. But this particular funding mechanism literally, once this Supreme Court ruling came down in favor of Eagle Point Solar, it allowed me to come to entities like this, or basically every entity that or any entity that does not file a tax return, and say, there is another option for you to take advantage of monetizing the tax credits, even though you don't file a tax return. Okay? Is that going to be best for the city of Anamosa? I absolutely cannot answer that tonight, because we haven't done any of the analysis. Okay? But that's where it starts. Now, as a company, what we do is, everybody that works on your project is going to be an Eagle Point Solar employee. So we do all the paperwork, we do all the analysis, we do all the engineering, we do all of the electrical work, we do all of the installation. All right? So what we can do is we are very, very efficient at doing these types of analysis, to make sure that so you can make an educated decision of whether or not this makes sense. Okay? That's what we bring to the table. So we don't contract anything out to anybody else. That in itself, I believe, is the biggest reason we are the largest in Iowa. And we've done that many projects. So, questions so far on anything that I've covered? I absolutely went over a tremendous amount of information very quickly.
So part of this analysis, if we went to a PPA, would be the financier, the banks, are the ones going to make the money if they've got a pay the bills to protect their investment. What kind of return are they getting after they pay their bills? What do most of them work toward? 3%, 4%, 10%?
Once again, I'll use the city of Cedar Rapids, that we did. And that's basically that's a 25-year PPA. It's an 8.5 cent PPA. It was 156 kW array, all right? That particular project, the investor is going to achieve about a 10% rate of return over 25 years.
Okay.
Because there are a couple of things that the investor does of how they can actually make money at this. One is monetizing the tax credits. Two is the solar array will produce electricity at between 4 and 6 cents a kilowatt, depending on how big it is. And if they turn around and sell it for 8.5 or 9 cents, okay, so they have a revenue stream there. You're paying 25% less, assuming you're paying 12 cents with Alliant Energy, and that's how that works. So that's how the investor actually makes money on this. Now, if you go to a standard outside investor, you know, they are probably going to want to have 8.5 or 9 cents to get that rate of return. When I set up investor meetings, I encourage people, if they know of individuals that are connected to the city in some way, shape, or form, that has an interest in monetizing the tax credits, they may have a tendency to give you a lower PPA rate because they're connected to the city, etc. I can't guarantee that you have somebody like that, and if you don't, we just go to the regular investment market. Which brings us to another thing that we do at Eagle Point Solar is we also have an investment entity as part of our company. It's the ownership structure. It's the 3 owners of Eagle Point Solar, of which I'm a member of, is we do fund municipal projects. So we funded Cedar Rapids internally, we funded Johnson County internally, we funded NICC internally, etc., and we'll evaluate something like that. So we do bring that to the table if that's the chosen funding mechanism. So, and once again, it really depends on what you want to do. Another thing that I do besides the council meetings or the school board meetings is I do hold investor meetings for people that are interested in participating in this. Some people have appetites for larger projects. Some people are more interested in the smaller ones. I've got a certain group of investors that won't look at anything less than $1 million. And I've got several that say, hey, you know, I'm in for $250,000. It depends on the project. But all of that analysis is done up front before you're making any sort of a commitment, because once again, this has to make sense. Okay? Excellent question, though. Other questions, sir?
Larry,
Yes.
there's, other than the microinverter, which converts this, there's no storage capacity, no battery bank or anything like that.
That is correct. Your
So
standard.
it is a daytime only conversion, and at nighttime you do switch to the normal power.
You are correct. And that's where that term that I talked about with net metering is extremely critical. Because you're right, solar arrays don't work at night, which is why we are not eliminating the utility at all. Okay? So that solar array is going to run during the day. That's going to handle, hopefully, whatever load that you have. And in a lot of cases, hopefully, that it overproduces, because Alliant Energy is going to store the excess kilowatt hours of electricity. And that's what you use at night. So if your objective on maybe one of these buildings or somewhere is, I want to wipe out my electricity bill, based on their net metering policy, you can do that, with the exception of the meter charge. It's exactly what I did on my house in Dubuque, right?
So, say like in summertime, it could help them get through their peak power.
Absolutely, yes. A solar array will always produce more in the summertime than it is in the wintertime, and that's just simply because the days are longer. Okay? And that's part of this report that I talked about that I will go over and make sure that you knew that. It's exactly why I collect that couple years of historical data, because I want to see what your use profile is. Right? We want to know when you're using power, because that could be critical. But with Alliant Energy's net metering policy and them storing the credit and allowing you to use it and giving you what you're paying for it, it's absolutely the best policy in the state of Iowa. There's no doubt about it. That helps the economics. Now, some of the RECs, not so much, but their policy is different. That's why we have to understand it. Okay?
Thank you.
Anybody else?
With the various options that you talked about, can you divulge references to to the various options that could be contacted.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Cedar Rapids, Johnson County, they love to show off their array. We built the largest solar array in Iowa at Vermeer. We're finishing that up right now. Kelowna, absolutely. If you want to go see it, they love to show it off.
Sounds interesting.
Okay, if there isn't any other questions, I think my 15 minutes of fame are up. I'll let you get back to the city business. Obviously, my card is in that booklet. If anybody has any additional questions, please feel free to contact me. Shoot me an email. If you're going to call me, please call my cell phone because I travel, and I will get back with you. But I would like to dig into this a little bit further. Obviously, if the council decides it makes sense. Okay. Thank you.
very much.
Gary.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Safe trip home. That was me. I just said safe trip home.
Oh, yep.
5.0 proclamations done. Council action items. 6.0 community betterment. 6.1 discussion of possible action approving the annual financial report for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2016.
Move to approve. Think so.
First by Bill,
Second.
second by Betty. Any discussion? No discussion? All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes. Yes.
Opposed? Carried. 6.2, discussion of possible action approving annual urban renewal report for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2016.
Move to approve.
First by Bill,
Second.
second by Rod. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Opposed? Carried. 6.3, discussion of possible action on first reading of ordinance to add chapter 148 minimum dwelling standards to the ordinances of the city of Anamosa.
Move to approve.
First by Bill,
Second.
second by Rod. Any discussion? And it's a roll vote.
Bill,
Yes.
Rod,
Yes.
Cody,
No.
Betty,
Yes.
Rick.
Yes.
6.4, discussion of possible action on first reading of ordinance to add chapter 149 health regulations, minimum living standards to the ordinances of the city of Anamosa, Iowa.
Move to approve.
First by Bill,
Second.
second by Betty. Any discussion?
Yeah, you were obviously involved with the alteration.
Yes.
Can you clarify 149.04 is highlighted, the impure water?
Yes, I'll read it for the audience's benefit, and then I'll make some comments. 149.04, impure water. No one shall keep open, use, or allow to be used for drinking or culinary purposes any cistern or reservoir. All residential, commercial, and industrial facilities within the corporate city limits shall be connected to the city water supply or approved private facilities or permitted by the city to utilize a private system for the purpose of irrigation, etc. What we did with this, this also concerned private wells and the testing and that type of thing, which was brought out by a member of the audience at that time, that why would we be testing water when city water is tested continuously. And unless they have a prior agreement, and some people call those grandfathers or whatever, particularly if they're in an area of the city where they're not within 200 feet of the water supply or something of that nature, then by state standards, they have to have those tested periodically. Because, you know, water safety is becoming an even bigger and bigger issue. So with the recommendations were made, number one, why did we have in there? Well, and as was said before, this came from a community that has numerous private wells, and we don't. And so that was taken out, and then also the stipulation revised in that it couldn't be any cistern or reservoir. And then we also, because we have adopted now a procedure for, in using the schools as an example, they were the ones that council allowed to have their own irrigation system, but it's not for consumption. It's only for irrigation purposes of their ball fields. So that's why that clause was revised and those recommendations taken into consideration. Does that help?
Yeah, it does, just, I wanna follow up with it. So if a dwelling currently has their own well, and then city utility water becomes available to that area, they can continue to use their well. Do they have to have that those tests done at that time? And then second question is, what is periodically?
Well, I think that comes under USDA. If they come within range of our water supply, say we put a main into an area, whatever, if they're within range, they're required to hook onto that. Only time the city gives a grandfather or approval for somebody to use a private well is if they are outside of that range and cannot get to the public water supply. We don't try to step on the government's toes of the state, you know, that's not within our bailiwick for that kind of testing.
Okay, thank you.
And I make mention too, those kits are available for testing the water through the Soil Conservation District office.
The state determines when the periodical thereafter test will be performed?
That I can't answer. I don't know what they have for criteria on that.
The periodical is awful gray to me, especially when there's no timeline that's,
And see, when we don't regulate that end of it, other than the distance from the public water supply, then we're at a loss to do anything with it.
State requires it. That's how they find out where the nitrates are.
Any further discussion? It too is a roll vote.
I have a couple questions, please. In regards to chapter 148 and 149, can somebody refresh my memory or clarify the procedure for bringing an item back on the agenda that's been voted down in the past?
But if the language has changed, the concept of the ordinance, it can definitely be brought back. It can also be brought back by somebody that voted against it.
Right, I understand that, and that's what I've always understood to be the procedure. Can I ask who brought it forward the second time, even though it was reworded? Who brought it up the
It was
second
done
time?
at the recommendation of, well, you were one of the people that made a recommendation.
Right, and
If
that
we
was
were to
during
do-
discussion, then it got voted down, which
You
I was
said that-
pleased to see,
You said that some of that wording needed to be changed, so we did.
right? That still doesn't answer my question. Who put it back on the agenda?
I did,
You did?
yes.
I that it can only be brought back on the agenda by a no vote.
No, if the language changes, then it's a different
So
one.
you could just change one word in that ordinance and you could vote again on it all over again, correct? Is that what you're telling me?
No, I'm not, Mike. Don't put words in my mouth. We changed and implemented the recommendations that were offered.
Okay, thanks for the answer. Good to know for the future.
And that's a roll vote.
Rod,
Yes.
Cody,
No.
Betty,
Yes.
Rick,
Yes.
Bill.
Yes.
7.0 Public Safety. 7.1 motion to approve the renewal of beer and liquor license, Tyler and Downing Eatery, renewal of Class C liquor license, outdoor service area, and Sunday sale privileges.
Move to approve.
First by Bill, second by Rick. All those in favor signify by saying yes.
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 Opposed? Carried. 7.2, discussion and possible action on appointment of 3 volunteer firefighters. Dustin? Yeah. Appointer, Catherine Leonard, and Jason Barnes as recommended by the Fire Service Board.
Move to approve.
First by Bill,
Second?
second by Rod. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed? Carried. 8.0 Public Works, none. 9.0 Finance. 9.1 discussion and possible action approving the payment of bills for the month of November 2016.
Move to approve.
First by Bill,
Second.
second by Betty. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed? Carried. 9.2, discussion and possible action on resolution obligating funds from the Urban Renewal Tax Revenue Fund for appropriation to the payment of annual appropriation tax increment financed obligations, which shall come due in the next succeeding fiscal year for the Anamosa Lodge and Suites LLC DBA American Hotel.
Move to approve.
First by Bill,
Second.
Mutual.
second by Rick. And it's a roll vote.
Just for clarification, everyone knows that I had the resolutions sitting on your desk. The one that was in your packet for American needs to be replaced with the one that's the $57,951. Does everybody knows what they're doing? Cody,
Yes.
Betty,
Yes.
Rick,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
Rod.
Yes.
Okay. 9.3, discussion and possible action on resolution obligating funds from the Urban Renewal Tax Revenue Fund for appropriation to the payment of annual appropriation tax increment financed obligations which shall come due in the next succeeding fiscal year for the Anamosa Nursing Home Company DBA Anamosa Care Center.
Move to approve.
First by Bill,
Second?
second by Rod. And that too is a roll vote.
Betty,
Yes.
Rick,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
Rod,
Yes.
Cody.
Yes.
We're gonna change these, we'll have mayor and council reports before the city administrators reports.
I was at the tourism meeting, last one, and I sound like a broken record, but I continue to be impressed with the work they're able to do with their small budget. It's well-managed, the group involved is very, very committed. And I think they had been planning on about 16 tours this year, which was up from last year. They ended up with 22 tours that they brought through, which is significant. And some of them, of course, stayed at the hotel. And they had some questions about hoping to see if the revenue has increased from all the workers who have been living here in town while they worked on the fairway. Whether they would see some of that increase. Of course, they're always trying to expand their exposure. The hope is that they can reach 250-mile radius beyond us, which requires a little more money for advertising, which is the majority of what they do, to get people who would come in and then have to stay. 250 miles, you're likely not to turn around and go back. And I hope that can be considered in the next budget. Thanks. That's it.
Do we know when we get the hotel motel money thing comes in quarterly, right, from the state to the city, what has been spent, correct? Does that come quarterly?
It comes quarterly, yes.
Okay.
We'll have a report this week.
Anamosa's Park and Rec Board met on November 16th. They're generating a report that they will submit to the council, to the city, regarding Scott's replacement at the end of the year, or I shouldn't say replacement, interim filling of that position. They also have the Jim McDonough Christmas Show is Saturday, December 3rd at the high school. Tickets are still available. They went over the tree walk. That is Thursday, the next discussion on that will be Thursday, December 8th. They also are in the process of replacing one of the park board members who is resigning due to leaving town. Their family is moving, so they're currently reviewing possibilities for that replacement. That's all I have.
That it? 11.2, discussion of possible action on resignation of council member.
I guess that's me. Sadly, I will be submitting my resignation tonight after the last meeting. I had hoped to fulfill a full term, which is quite a bit longer than the not quite year that I ended up doing. But I have to say, Cody, you were right that you said maybe after the second year I finally felt like I knew what I was doing. I feel like the first year you're still in the learning process, that's for sure, and it takes a lot of research. And I have enjoyed every minute of it, despite some of the challenges and difficulties. How the city comes together and tries to resolve issues and move forward for all community members is, I think, what we're all shooting for. And I will miss being on the council. Circumstances have changed, so I am also moving. So my heart will still be here. I'll still receive the local newspaper and try to stay in touch. Thanks.
Could I get a motion to accept the resignation?
So moved.
First by Bill,
Second.
second by Rod.
Didn't bring my rope with me. I can't tie him to his chair.
Bunch
You can
of
vote now.
extra set of cuffs. All those in favor signify by saying yes.
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 Opposed?
No.
All right.
That doesn't surprise me.
11.0, city administrator report.
Okay, in following that up, and sadly with the untimely passing of Councilman Chuck Smith, I did a little research. I pretty well knew it, but I thought I'd better hone up on a little on what the Iowa Code stipulates for filling these vacancies which we now have 2. And Iowa Code Chapter 372, 13, subsection 2, and I paraphrased it because it's rather lengthy, but I ran it by the League of Cities this afternoon through the membership division and their council, and have agreed on what you have before you, and for the audience benefit, I'll read it. The council shall have the option to appoint to fill a council vacancy or fill the vacancy by special election. This applies to each vacancy. Appointment: within 60 days, the council may make an appointment to fill the vacancy. If the council does not take action within that time frame, a special election shall be scheduled with the county commissioner of elections. Councils shall give proper notice by publication of no less than 4 days nor more than 20 days in a newspaper of general circulation within the community. However, if within 14 days after publication of the notice or within 14 days after the appointment is made, there is filed with the city clerk a valid petition which requests a special election to fill the vacancy, an appointment to fill the vacancy is temporary, and the council shall call a special election to fill that vacancy permanently until the end of the unfulfilled term. A petition for special election: the minimum number of signatures for a valid petition shall be 200 of the voters voting in the last city election for that office, or 15%, whichever is fewer. In that particular case, talking about Rick's case here, 784 voted in the last city election. Therefore, 15% equates to 118 eligible voters that would be needed on a petition. This requirement is per each vacancy. Council shall also have the option to set a special election, giving the county commissioner of elections a minimum of 32 days advance written notice before such election can be held. That's all I have.
All right.
And I would like to throw in my 2 cents and my regrets that not only have we lost Chuck Smith, and now we're losing Rick Sanborn at his resignation. And I appreciate the work we've done together. Thank you.
Thank you.
12.0, public with business with the council on items not on the agenda. 13.0, adjournment.
So moved.
First by Bill, second by Rick. All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Opposed?